Sudiksha Konanki is a 20-year-old junior at the University of Pittsburgh. She's originally from Virginia's Loudoun County and is an Indian citizen and a legal permanent U.S. resident. She was on spring break with a group of 6 female friends from her school. In the early morning hours of March 6th, surveillance footage captured Sudiksha leaving the Rio Republica Hotel around 4:15 a.m., accompanied by friends and 2 other men. The group proceeded to the beach. While her friends returned to the hotel at around 5:55 a.m., Sudiksha did not accompany them. She stayed with a man named Josh Ribe, a student from another school who was also staying at the resort. The following morning, just before 9 a.m., Ribe is on video returning to the hotel without his shirt. Meanwhile, Sudiksha did not return. The Dominican National Police are re-interviewing witnesses, including Ribe, who has reportedly given 3 slightly different versions of what happened. Search efforts have involved drones and helicopters and detection dogs. The U.S. State Department, the FBI, and the Embassy of India are all collaborating with local investigators. Sudiksha's parents have traveled to Punta Cana and are urging a broader investigation beyond an accidental drowning. Tonight, we have all the latest in this investigation. But first, it was a single mistake, a crucial clue. Amid the carnage of the brutal murders in Moscow, Idaho, investigators found it. An abandoned tan leather knife sheath, carelessly left beside one of the victims, stamped with the unmistakable insignia of the U.S. Marines. It bore a chilling revelation, a touch of DNA, a microscopic thread of evidence that would unravel the mystery. For weeks, authorities had searched desperately for a lead, and then science spoke. DNA on the sheath's snap fastener allowed investigators to use investigative genetic genealogy, which led them to the suspect and laid the foundation for the case against the accused killer. And now tonight, we know how the defense will attempt to explain the most important and incriminating piece of evidence in the case for the man accused of murdering Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. This is the case. This is it. I mean, this is the key, the foundation, the most incriminating evidence in the case against the suspect in the murders of those 4 students, those 4 lives that were stolen. Xana, Maddie, Kaylee, and Ethan. 4 students living their lives, doing nothing wrong, provoking no one, just going to school, working hard, enjoying the company of each other, doing everything that we want our kids to do when they go off to college and grow into young adults. That's exactly what they were doing. Nothing wrong. This is a case where there's no real motive. I mean, the allegation is basically that this is a madman. This is some sort of a, not legal insanity, but a psychotic killer who took out these young people for no reason, just for the thrill of the kill. It's sick, and it's scary. And we cover a lot of cases here on Court TV where, you know, there's some warnings, there's some writing on the walls, there's something that happens between the parties, and while it's not an excuse, you understand what motivated it here. This is stuff that you can't predict, you can't anticipate, you can't protect yourself from. If you believe the prosecution's theory here, that this is just a psychotic madman who wanted to see what it felt like to take the lives of 4 human beings, and then to see if he could get away with it. Now, in this case, there's no murder weapon. Murder weapon has not been found. And that, you know, every prosecution, there's no such thing as the perfect case. We have some really strong cases. with videos, eyewitnesses, maybe some form of a confession. There's no confession here. There's no murder weapon here. There's no clothes that have been gathered that somehow connect this defendant to the murders. What do you have? You have a sheath. That's what you have, a sheath and some DNA. The DNA right on the snap of the sheath. And that's the case, folks. A sheath and some DNA, period. End of story. That's the foundation that if you believe that evidence and trust that evidence, it's a strong foundation. Absolutely strong. So I've been looking at that from the beginning saying, okay, everything else you can attack. You can attack this. You don't have this. You don't have that. Cell phone this, cell phone that. White Elantra. Yeah, there's other white Elantras. But according to investigators, it's his DNA right here. And this was found right beneath Maddie and the comforter, one of the victims. So what is the defense going to do here? I think we've got a much, much better idea now exactly how they're going to attempt to explain this extremely incriminating evidence. Let's begin by listening to Jeff Nye, Deputy Attorney General, speaking in court.
He's been a little bit wishy-washy on the DNA on the knife sheath itself. You don't get to claim Fourth Amendment standing and then just say, well, that may be my DNA, but I have no idea how it got there. We have a defendant who is trying to get the best of both worlds. He's trying to say, well, it's not my DNA and the state can't prove that, but he's also trying to say that he has Fourth Amendment standing. And that is not how the Fourth Amendment works.
Right, and it's interesting, the argument there, right? The defendant's trying to say, well, you had no right to gather my evidence here and to find out that my DNA was here, but then on the other side of the mouth saying it's not my DNA. Well, now we have a much clearer idea. Prosecution filed the motion, and in the motion, they reference how the defense is going to attack this, as I said, extremely incriminating and crucial evidence. Instead of challenging the conclusion that the DNA on the knife sheath belonged to the defendant, the defense's expert disclosures reveal that the defense plans to argue the DNA on the knife sheath does not prove the defendant was ever at the crime scene, and the knife sheath itself could have been planted by the real perpetrator. Let that sink in, okay? The knife sheath itself could have been planted by the real perpetrator. What does that sound like? He was framed. He was framed. Some other madman said, I'm going to commit a mass murder, and I want to frame this grad student from Pullman, Washington. All right, like who? Who? And is there any, was it the Uber Eats guy who delivered the Uber Eats, and that's the real murderer? And that Uber Eats person broke in to the suspect's house and stole his knife and his knife sheath, and then made sure that he had some of his DNA on this. Come on. Well, that's it. That's it. Is that going to be the argument? Is that it? Let's bring in our think tank. Joining us tonight, criminal defense attorney Eklund Mercy. Also with us, retired criminal defense attorney Kirk Nurmi. That's why he looks so relaxed. And former federal prosecutor, president of the West Coast Trial Lawyers, Nima Rahmani is with us. Eklund, you know, I'm trying to think of who would do that, right? And you can't make the analogy of like the OJ case, right? OJ was kind of the same argument that some of his DNA was planted at the scene, but that was by investigators. And that was a defendant who was already a suspect. That was a defendant who was high profile and everybody knew who he was. Nobody knows who this guy is. Nobody knows him. Nobody heard of him before this. So who do you suspect could potentially want to I guess it would be like a break-in to steal this, unless he like maybe broke into his house, swabbed him, right? He broke into the suspect's house while he's sleeping, swabbed him, then held onto that swab, and then stole his knife sheath, rubbed it on here really good. Like, is it absurd that they're going to actually make this argument to a jury?
I think, I think a jury selection is the most important part of a trial. But also...
So are you looking for people who, when you open up the dictionary and look for gullible, you have pictures of them there?
No.
Is that how they're going to pick the jury?
But here's the thing. What I would look into is anybody who was really, for this particular case, the fact that there's no house, the fact that the house was destroyed before trial has always given me pause. The fact that the house has been destroyed and motions for jury walkthroughs hadn't been heard, motions to have the jury virtually be able to see.
I think what they're going to have is they have a 3D model that they're going to show them. I think it's ridiculous. You should have kept the house there, let them walk through.
Exactly.
But both sides were fine with it. Me as a prosecutor, I wouldn't have wanted it. So Kirk, do you think the defense can do this with a straight face? And that's the reasonable doubt, that somebody else planted it there to frame this guy?
Well, listen, Vinnie, I don't think, we've talked about this before in death penalty cases. Their number one job is to save their client's life, not to get a not guilty, not to create reasonable doubt, but residual doubt that would leave him with a life verdict instead, right? And so it doesn't have to be in the way that you're framing it, because also no evidence exists in isolation, right? So if they embrace some of the other DNA found, right, in the glove, in the stairwell, underneath the victim's fingernails, and say, none of that's related to Mr. Kohberger, but this piece of evidence is. Now, will that create reasonable doubt? No, but when you talk about sitting there and saying, condemning someone to the firing squad, is someone going to feel comfortable doing that, knowing that the only DNA of Mr. Kohberger's found on the scene is that sheath that you've been shown there? It could be easy somebody to steal that and use that knife, not framing Mr. Kohberger, but using someone else's knife. You could make that argument, and you could see jurors go, okay, I think he did it, but I don't know that I'm willing to sentence him to death with some of this undiscoverable DNA underneath the victim's fingernails that might turn out to be discoverable later. That could give jurors pause. And so while they're pre-selected in a way through a death penalty case that they're more likely to conviction, they're probably not going to buy it as it relates to conviction. But life or death, you got to think about that again, Vinnie. Don't take it so whimsically.
So if reasonable doubt is this big, right, what you're talking about is like residual doubt, which might be like this, and that a juror might say, well, I know he did it, but like, I don't have the video, I don't have the confession, just in case I'm making a mistake, life. I get it. I get what you're saying. Nima, take a look at this. State's motion for a protective order is from June of 23. Just to give you more background on the knife sheath, was found on a bed next to the bodies of Madison and Kaylee. The sheath was face down and partially under both Madison's body and the comforter on the bed. Like, this could not be like more closely related to the scene of the murder than this, right? I mean, this is underneath the victim's body. Underneath the victim's body on the bed where she and her best friend were murdered. To me, it's not just that the DNA is on a knife sheath, it's also where the knife sheath is found.
Well, that's absolutely right, Vinnie, and you touched upon it at the start of the show. This is the worst piece of evidence for the defense. So they really only have three choices. They can argue the scientific evidence, but you talked about OJ. We've come a long way since OJ. DNA is well accepted. The jurors are going to accept it. So the defense is stuck with one of two options, saying it was accidentally transferred or that it was planted. And I'm not saying any of those are good arguments, but they're apparently going with the planting argument. And they're probably going to say, listen, does it make sense for a crime scene this gruesome for there to be only one single source of DNA that's found, and it happens to be found on the knife sheath, and it happens to be found under the victims' bodies. It was clearly planted by someone that's trying to frame him. Again, I don't believe this at all, Vinny, but their defense lawyers, they're trying to save their client's life, like Kirk just said. So this is the argument they're going with, and good luck to them. I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, and it's the way you marshal it, the way you present it, the way you say it, and how much the jury trusts what you're saying about that being a potential reasonable alternative explanation for what happened here. But it's also the order of everything, right? And again, I compare this to OJ because OJ was a DNA case, and there were arguments that it could have been planted, but planted by investigators. Like, investigators didn't know who he was until they found out whose DNA this was, right? So it wasn't, in the other case, like, you had OJ and then you found DNA. Here you have no one, you find DNA, and it leads you to the suspect, which to me, Ekla, makes it much, much more compelling than the OJ DNA was.
Yeah, but it had to go through so many cycles. It had to go through so many hoops and like whirlwinds to get to where we're at today. So that's the issue. And just like how Nima perfectly laid out an argument, you know, for the defense. I mean, you can't have this gruesome murder and then not all the, and it's not the murder weapon, it's the sheath. Like, explain how it even got there. Like, well, the explanation.
It was not the perfect murder. It was not the perfect murder. That's the way I would say it. You know, he thought he committed the perfect murder, but he didn't.
Then where's the house?
He did.
Then let's keep
the house. Got knocked down. That is irrelevant. That happened after the murder. It got knocked down because the prosecution didn't want it up. The defense didn't want it up. The owner wanted to knock it down. The university doesn't want it there. The families were against it. At least one of the families of the victims was against it, but nobody seemed that concerned that the jury should see the scene of the crime, where the scene of the crime is extremely important in all of this. I mean, it's crucial to understand it because there's surviving witnesses who were in there, and to not be able to walk the way the killer did that night, I think is a huge, huge mistake. And it's a very unusual house. This is not a normal house. It's built on a hill. There's 3 levels to it. It's not huge, but it's got 3 levels and stairwells and stairways. What can you see from where? I would want the jury, because I just want the jury to get to the truth, and I want them to understand it. I don't think a 3D model does it, but some people are into that. Kirk, let me ask you. The other way that I see, like, do you have to explain how it could have gotten there, or is the defense going to just leave it at, well, ladies and gentlemen, you know, someone else could have left it there? And do they leave it like there, or do they say, well, could have done this, could have done that? You know, do they get into how they even got his DNA to begin with, where he got the knife sheath from? I don't know if there's any report of him reporting a stolen knife from his house. Like, do they get into all those details, or do they just kind of toss it out there that, hey, we don't know where it came from, could have been planted there by someone else?
Yeah, that's why I say it depends on how you frame it, Vinny, and I wouldn't even use the word planted, right? I would use the word that it was used, it could have been stolen, it could have been found somewhere. We don't know how it got there, but it was his knife sheath, but we don't know how it got there, and somebody took it and used it. It's like, you know, it could have been stolen. If I was over at your house having dinner, Vinny, and you show me your arsenal, and I take one of your guns and I commit a killing with it, I don't leave any DNA, you're going to be the #1 suspect, right? So you have different angles you can use. Not that it was purposely framed like OJ, but that it was taken by the killer, not with the intent of framing him, but with the intent of obscuring their identity.
Yeah, the good news is for me, I've got an alibi. My phone was on the whole time. It was with me. You can check. It wasn't turned off at the time of the murders. Like this suspect's phone just happened to be turned off at the time of the murders. Bad luck again for this suspect. All right, Nima, I'll go to you. but you have to promise not to make another defense argument. Do you promise? So,
I promise.
How defensive do prosecutors get on that theory? Do they spend a lot? Do they just sort of get it out through cross-examination? Is it something that they address head-on, or does it give it more credence if you spend more time in trying to defeat the argument that it could have just been left there?
Vinnie, as a prosecutor, I like to get ahead of bad facts and take the sting out of the defense's good arguments. This is not a good argument by the defense. I would spend absolutely no time on this. If they raise it during their opening statements, whether they do an initial opening or they reserve or in their case in chief, I addressed it in closing. And look, we're talking about reasonable doubt, right? And when I'm talking to the jurors, I ask them, is this reasonable? You don't leave your common sense at the door when you walk into that courtroom. This is not a reasonable argument. So I don't spend much time, if any, because I think that tends to give more weight to ridiculous arguments like this.
And Eklund, if they want to really advance this theory, you know, the defendant could take the witness stand and tell the jury how his knife was stolen.
Or he can use his Fifth Amendment and not do that.
Oh, would that be because maybe it wasn't stolen?
Or here's the thing, it's the prosecution's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think that there are arguments that can be made. I think that, again, the juries now are so much more savvy, and they do look for more nuances now. They want, they understand, you know, they understand having motive. They understand rationale. They may want connections, and if the prosecution isn't ready to provide that, they have a problem.
All right. Folks, this trial's happening. Jury selection scheduled for August. Think Tank sticking around tonight. When we come back, where is Sudiksha, the Virginia, young woman from Virginia going to the University of Pittsburgh who was in the Dominican Republic? We've got an update on everything happening there, plus coming up next hour. Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, the full 43-second video of the so-called bridge guy from the Delphi murders has been released. We showed it to you last night, but tonight we will take a closer listen to enhanced audio to figure out not only what we see, but what we hear in this video.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
Doomsday Cult mom is now lawyer Lori.
She's representing herself.
On charges of conspiring to murder her fourth husband.
She said, I can murder you now.
The Cult Mom Conspiracy Trial. Live coverage coming soon, only on Court TV.
All right, here is some video of the water search taking place in the Dominican Republic as the search continues for Sudiksha Konanki, who is an American. She's also an Indian citizen, grew up in Virginia, went to the University of Pittsburgh, was on spring break with a group of girls from the university. And one night, the power goes out in the hotel. A lot of the young people head down to the beach. You know, the power's out, let's go to the beach. She goes to the beach, and it seems like she had connected with a young man who is from a different school, and they ended up staying at the beach while all her friends left. He came back 9 in the morning. She didn't come back. So we've been trying to figure out, and the folks in the Dominican Republic, and some of the folks here, the FBI included, trying to figure out, you know, what happened and where is Sudiksha. Let's bring in Cody Thomas, Court TV field reporter, has been following all the latest developments here. So What's the latest tonight in the search and investigation?
Well, Vinnie, this is day 7 of the search. She went missing 1 week ago on March 6th, and now one of the latest things that Interpol has put out, a global alert for Sudiksha Konanki all over the world. And you just mentioned that we have FBI, we even have some DEA, we have Homeland Security down there on the ground, we have the Dominican authorities, and even since she's an Indian national, the Indian Embassy is offering their assistance as well. So hundreds of law enforcement personnel on the ground there in the Dominican Republic, aiding in what's now being called the largest search in the island's history.
Wow.
And some of the Dominican authorities gave this statement to the local network down there, and of course we had it translated, but let's take a listen to that right now.
The main people involved are the staff of our Attorney General's office, representatives of the Public Prosecutor's office, who at the moment, in coordination with the FBI representatives, with our embassy liaison, with the National Police and personnel of the Central Direction of Investigations, are taking stock of this first stage of the search and investigations to see where we stand. After that, we will be able to provide more details.
And Vinnie, of course, along with that network statement, the Dominican authorities also released this written statement that says, in part, regarding the investigation, the prosecution, which is conducting multiple investigative steps that extend beyond a possible accidental event, is keeping the course of the case confidential in accordance with Dominican procedural regulations for this stage. We are using all our resources to thoroughly investigate the disappearance of Konanki Sudiksha Chadari, and we understand the anguish this case causes to her family, Dominicans, and Americans. As with any disappearance occurring under the circumstances of the case at hand, we are applying a holistic investigation protocol that examines all variables. So, Vinnie, it sounds like this is an all-hands-on-deck situation.
Yeah, this is a situation. They're not sweeping this under the rug.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
That is not happening here. I wanted to ask you, anything about her phone? Have we heard anything about her phone?
Nothing much, Vinnie, but there have been reports that, because we know her father and her parents flew down to the Dominican Republic, and there have been reports that her father says that her phone was left along with her wallet with her friends that arrived back at the hotel without her, leaving her on the beach, which is interesting because he says that she usually carries her phone everywhere she goes, as any college student would.
Right. So when the part of the group came back, they took her phone.
They had her belongings.
Maybe they were carrying it and they forgot, but because that's one way you track someone down, right? It's the phone.
It's 2025. They track any crime. We see it all the time here at Court TV.
Yeah. Now, last night we were talking about official person of interest, not a suspect, person of interest, Josh Ribe. What do we know about him?
Of course, 24 years old, student senior at St. Cloud's University in Minnesota. And as you just said, he is the person of interest. He is cooperating. He's had 3 different stories that go along with what was happening that night. They're trying to corroborate, make sure that everything's lining up, questioning his credibility. But like you said, he is not a suspect, which is the most important thing to note about him, just a person of interest.
Right, because he's the last known person to be with her.
Absolutely.
He was with her alone on the beach. He comes back at 9 a.m. She doesn't. How about his family? Because there's got to, her family, we know they're absolutely devastated. He looks like he's taking a selfie right there.
You see him. He has his phone. We've heard nothing about his phone either. So what are on those phone records or anything erased? That could give us some answers as far as that.
Exactly. If you track the movements of his phone that night, and does it jibe with the story that he's telling? How about his family? What are they saying?
So his friends and his family, some of them are saying that he wouldn't hurt a fly. This could not be what Joshua could have done. That's not who he is. That's not his character. His aunt, Teresa Ribe, released this written statement here saying, "Our family is going through a very difficult time right now, and we're experiencing a lot of sadness and pain. We kindly ask for privacy as we navigate this challenging moment together." So naturally, as any family member would, they want to be closed off. They don't really want to talk about it. They just want everything to fold out as it should and hopefully find this missing woman.
Yeah. And there's really 2 parts to this investigation, right? There's trying to find her and then trying to figure out what exactly happened and why she disappeared. Cody Thomas, thanks so much. Let's bring in retired FBI Special Agent, Missing Persons Search Expert, Kenneth Gray. Kenneth, great to see you tonight. Thanks so much. What are your initial thoughts about this investigation at this point? We're 1 week into it now.
Vinnie, originally the Dominican Republic police were saying that she drowned. It's only because of all the pressure being brought to bear against them that this has become a major search. My old organization, the FBI, is now involved in this. I don't know what assets they brought with them, but one asset that they may have brought that I certainly would want to use in this case is a polygraph. That is, Joshua Reeb here has had 3 different stories as to what he saw of her. One, that she was in the water and that a wave hit her and that he did not see her after that. Another one, that he saw her walking along the beach picking up her clothes. And a third story I don't have the details on, but I would want to polygraph him to find out exactly what he believes to be true.
How about his phone? What would you do with his phone? We're looking at him right here. It looks like they're taking a selfie together.
Yeah, absolutely. So the phone is going to be able to give you location information. It would be very interesting because if something happened untoward with her, he would have to dispose of the body somewhere. And that phone may lead to where her body is. But then again, if she went out into the water, he may have left his phone on the beach at the same time he was in the water. It may not show that location. It depends on where his phone was, whether it was on his person or if it was left there on the beach.
And I don't know if this is even a question that can be answered. I'm not sure. But looking at all potential scenarios in all of this, if something happened and she died and then is disposed of in the water versus dying in the water, would you expect a difference in the way, does it change the way you search for the body? If she dies first, something happens, then is disposed of in the water versus something happens to her while she's in the water?
If you're using water to hide the body, you would want to weigh down the body to keep it unfound. If instead you left it on the surface, it would be no different than if the person had drowned. That is, the body would likely be back on the shore at some point. So I think that the difference is that if it's weighed down, you'd have to go along and search for a body that had been weighed down under the water, as opposed to just being taken out by the tide.
And what is your level of optimism here a week in actually finding her? And you know, we're looking at some of the footage down there, and the water can get a little choppy down in the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a week in now, and so if she were alive, somebody would have some information to show where she is. So the question is has she drowned? Will her body wash back ashore at some point, or is she somewhere on land where her body has been hidden? You need to put a lot of bodies there, walking shoulder to shoulder through the woods in the area there close to the beach, to try to find a body that has been disposed of by hiding it somewhere there. He's a big guy, and so he would likely be able to carry her some distance. If he did something to her, they will, if that's the case, be concentrating on the woods like you see there in the video, to try to find her body. But I think the likelihood of her being alive at this point is remote.
Yeah, incredibly tragic. And she may have just drowned, and that's a tragedy also. I mean, whatever happened here is really heartbreaking for the family and a huge loss. Kenneth Gray, always great to get your insight. Thank you so much. When we come back, we'll bring back in our think tank and talk about more of the search for Sudiksha. There's video, but there's no video from the beach. So these are the last known images of Sudiksha as she's heading to the beach. There you see her, and the man with his arm around her, that's Josh Reib. Now, Josh Reib, I guess, met her down there, and they got along well together. They have their arms around one another, taking a selfie. Maybe a little romance was started. I don't know, but it seems like they're together, and they were together down the beach. 6 of them went down, 4 came back. About 6 o'clock in the morning, and then at 9 o'clock in the morning, 1 of them came back. You do the math, 1 is still nowhere to be found, and that is Sudiksha. So what happened to her? I want to put this up because I think this is important as well. 2 months prior to all of this, and we found this on the Civil Defense Facebook post, that personnel down there participated in the search and rescue of several tourists who had disappeared on the beach after being swept away by strong currents. After hours of searching, the lifeless bodies of 4 of them were located, while 2 were rescued alive and sent to a medical center. So, you know, it's like water anywhere. Like it can be very dangerous. There can be riptides that can take you out. So it's very plausible that she could have drowned. It's very plausible that she could have drowned if she was in the water and, you know, got swept up by a riptide or the current. Let's bring back in our think tank, criminal defense attorney Eklund Mercy, retired criminal defense attorney Kirk Nurmi, and former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani. Kirk, what are your thoughts about Josh Ribe, right? So he's the last person with her. He's cooperating. His stories have varied a little bit. I'm a little uncomfortable with that myself, but, you know, I don't know. I don't know what the truth is. Do you think he should leave the Dominican Republic? Can he leave the Dominican Republic? What happens if he leaves the Dominican Republic? How much, you know, it's a week later now. What are your thoughts about how that can or should play out for Josh Ribe?
Look, it seems like he's made himself available, and I think one thing that authorities do know at this point that we probably don't know is the movement of his cell phone that was just brought up in the last segment. If his cell phone remained on the beach, and you just showed this training looking for missing tourists that have drowned, the possibility of drowning, the specter of drowning seems really high. We might learn in upcoming days from security footage, were they out drinking? Did alcohol play a sense in his conflicting stories, things of that nature? Because at this point, while he's a quote-unquote person of interest, he is only that because he was the last person to see her alive, not because there's evidence of anything nefarious. So would he maybe want to stay until the investigation, maybe with the cell phones are done? Perhaps. But at this point in time, really, there's no evidence that he did anything improper at this point. So what he does really should be of his own accord.
Nima, as I look at this, you know, the questions I have, obviously his cell phone, huge. Apparently her cell phone was in the possession of her friend, so that's not going to give us any sort of information. But how about her clothes? I mean, if they're going for a swim, I don't know if she's going to wear exactly what she is seen on this video in there. It looks like she has some sort of a jacket going on. I don't know if she has a bathing suit on. He comes back without a shirt on. I mean, to me, those are a couple of important issues here, right? Like, where's the clothing?
It is important, and apparently when the friends went back to look for her, they found her sandals and her cover-up. So that was still on the beach. And look, the cell phone is going to be important, but it really has to match his story. And his story is that either he watched her go into the water and he passed out, or they were together in the water and he passed out. So assuming he's not on TikTok and scrolling, you know, and his phone is just there on the beach, that could be consistent with him passing out, or consistent with him doing something nefarious. So I'm not sure the cell phone will be dispositive in this case unless there was some activity on it, because it can be argued that it would support either an accidental theory or a homicide.
So Eklund, as we look at this case and we try to figure out what happened, why it happened, how it happened, we still don't know where she is. How important is it in finding her first before understanding the second part of this mystery?
I think that in trying to find out what happened, you can find her, or there are things that you can rectify. I think that the young man should not leave Dominican Republic, and I think that law enforcement has learned their lesson with the Gabby case, in the sense that if 2 leave and only 1 show up, maybe we should ask that one some questions, because him not only to go there and leave with not only a T-shirt, but he had socks and sneakers and came back barefoot without his shirt, and then is providing different stories. What happened? What happened? What happened? Like, tell us what happened. Did she give, like, let us know the story right now. Like, go through the whole thing. And then it seemed like I would love to know how her gait was prior to that date, because you're telling me, are you intoxicated when you took her away from the hotel? Or did you go to a bar between 4 a.m.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think they just went to the beach,
like,
right? Yeah, a lot of questions. We're out of time for tonight, but obviously we'll keep digging. Eklund, Mercy, Kirk Nurmi, Nina Romani, thank you so much. When we come back, I will reveal something else you need to know tonight, and you really need to know this one. Plus, coming up next hour. Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, it is chilling and mysterious. The full 43-second bridge guy video from the Delphi murder case. Tonight, we break it down frame by frame with our trial insiders.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, coming up next, only on Court TV.
It's a whodunit Hollywood story.
Monica Cimentelli is accused of plotting to kill her husband.
Celebrity hairstylist Fabio Cimentelli.
The celebrity stylist murder trial, weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's take a look at the big board. Sex crimes arrest. Let me give you the backstory here. We're in a small town in Utah. The local fire chief gets arrested for child pornography. Then the local judge shocks everyone by letting him out on bond. Prosecutors had asked for no bond. Then they started to investigate the judge, and they found out that the judge and the fire chief were in an undisclosed sexual relationship with one another. They were having conversations about molesting children. The judge has been arrested. Now, Scripps News Group reporter Avery Klanowski gives us the rest of the story.
The city of Tremonton.
Typical small town, like we're all family, we all love each other, like we try to keep an eye out for things that are going wrong.
I don't know what or where they're gonna come out, so we'll see.
Melissa Alvey says the town is known for its Mayberry feel.
Everybody knows each other, everybody knows each other's business, which can be good, which can be also kind of not good.
So when something happens, their hope is that they can work through it together.
A lot of anger is circling and people are very upset about what's been going on.
Like, you hear about people abusing their power and authority, but you don't actually, like, you kind of hope that it's just exaggerated. And then my heart goes out to those poor kids.
Tremonton Fire Chief Ned Brady Hansen and Box Elder County Judge Kevin Robert Christensen are being charged with offenses involving child sexual abuse amongst other alleged crimes.
When I found out that they were in on it together, I'm just like, okay, who else?
If this is happening, like, is it going to be somebody else that's higher up?
The judge assigned to the case recused himself, citing a rule that judges must disqualify themselves if there's reasonable chance someone could question their impartiality. Both men remain in custody in separate jails. I made several calls to try to discuss the case with officials in Weber and Box Elder County, but wasn't able to speak with anyone. Tremonton's mayor did call me back and tell me it's been a shock for their entire community. He wants trust to be restored.
So it's going to hopefully look like a little fairy forest.
Melissa says her friends are sick over what has happened, but she and her family are protecting their peace.
And then I have some milkweed seeds that I'm going to put in these big pots. I just definitely hope that the community leans on each other versus being afraid of each other. Just keep trusting that there is still some good in the world.
In Tremonton, Avery Klanowski, Fox 13 News, Utah.
Wow. Okay, we have another child who needs your help tonight. Please take a look at your screens. This is Alexander Steiner, just 16 years old, missing out of South Burlington, Vermont. Here's what you need to do. If you see Alexander, pick up the phone, call 911, 1-800-THE-LOST, or the Burlington Police Department in Vermont. Let's see if we can get Alexander to a safe place tonight. Don't go anywhere. We have another hour of live true crime. Vinnie Politan Investigates is next. In the meantime, please don't forget to hug the kids.